Welcome to this week's Today's Health and Wellness Podcast, mini episode for March. This is Brett.
And I'm Ashley. First off, thanks for downloading and listening to this mini episode of our podcast. At the very beginning of the month, we bring you a full episode of Today's Health and Wellness. And as the month goes on, we want to make the segments of the podcast available for you so you don't have to skip through the longer monthly podcast.
All the information about this mini episode is in the podcast show notes. Enjoy.
We are talking today with Adam Turner from Sleep Outfitters. And Adam, everybody yawns. Everybody knows yawns are contagious. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what yawns are, why we yawn, and why they're contagious. Hey, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, first of all, why do we yawn?
Well, that's kind of been the question that plagues us at night. You know, I wondered that myself and did a little bit of research, and I was surprised to learn through article after article that there doesn't really seem to be a one single clear cut and dry answer. There's not really a great consensus on, after all this time of all the weird problems we have in the world and solutions for them, we still don't really know exactly why we yawn. I think the number proposed, there's about 20 reasons by scientists and scholars that they floated as, you know, reasons for why potentially we do yawn. But there are a few points, however, that people seem to be generally on board with. You know, we might not know exactly why. We usually know why not, though. The most popular opinion that's been floated around is that it's tied to oxygen. You know, we yawn because we're tired. We need more air in our body. And that's actually not the case, it seems, based off a lot of recent evidence and studies that they've done on the subject. People would assume that just because when we get tired at night, generally that's when, you know, we're yawning more. But it kind of makes sense the more you think about it when we're exercising, presumably when we need oxygen the most. Working out, it doesn't seem like we're yawning at a greater rate then. So generally speaking, it's safe to say yawning is not tied to oxygen. That's one of the points that came up in my studies.
We're talking today with Adam Turner from Sleep Outfitters. And Adam, I know that as you did your research, taking a look at yawning, of course, you know, we've all seen our dog yawn and our cat yawn, and this is not a human thing. And it also, even for humans, it goes back all the way to the womb. Right,
that's true. It starts spontaneous yawning. They kind of differentiate between two main types of yawning, spontaneous and contagious. The contagious part we'll get into in a minute, but spontaneous yawning, just the irrepressible yawn that you can't seem to hold back, that starts as early as the second trimester in the womb. And it seems that it's pretty so deeply embedded, it doesn't really even qualify as a reflex. When I was writing about it, I saw one quote that referred to it as a behavioral fossil. It's one of those things that's just been passed down generation to generation from the earliest of evolutions. It might not really have much of a relevant purpose anymore, but it's never done enough harm to us to totally just disappear from our, you know, general coding as people. So it's stuck around through time, and it is not exclusive to humans as well. Many animals partake in it. Obviously, if you've had a house cat or dog at home, you'll be laying in bed and see them mimic you when you start yawning late at night. But lots of creatures do it. Snakes do it to realign their jaws after they've had a big feast, you know, stretching their mouths out to swallow a mouse or whatever. Guinea pigs do it to communicate anger, funnily enough, which is kind of adorable. Penguins seem to incorporate it into their mating routines. Even fish underwater are yawning. So it's not just humans, and it's kind of just an interesting quirk that's stuck around throughout the animal kingdom for generations.
Now, believe it or not, as you looked at your research, you found that yawning could have something to do with body temperature.
Yes, that's true. It seems that's right now the prevalent theory. That's the one that's being floated the most by scientists. Just the idea that yawning is working almost as your brain's radiator. It's a way to keep everything cool. It probably isn't a surprise to anybody to learn that, you know, just for all that it's responsible for throughout the day, the brain can get pretty heated, and the yawn just helps contradict that some. It increases our heart rate, our blood flow, and the use of our facial muscles. If you think about taking in a yawn, all those things happen, and all of that's pretty vital to regulating your brain temperature. And that kind of explains why we yawn the most when we're worn down. Exhaustion and sleep deprivation can start to heat up the brain. And likewise, right before we go to bed and fall asleep at night, that's when our brain and body temperatures are at their highest point during the day. So yawning helps you offset some of that temperature. And likewise, once we wake up, our body temperatures are rising more rapidly at any point during the day. So right when you wake up in the morning, go to bed at night, that's usually when you're going to be yawning the most, and it seems to be tied to temperature in that way. There's been a couple studies. There's a Gallup poll study where participants placed warm and cold packs on their heads, and while they watched videos of other people yawning, 41% of the participants yawned when they had the warm pack on their head, while only 9% did so with a cold pack. So the correlation seemed kind of clear there that it was linked to, as simple as keeping the brain cool.
Some fascinating facts about yawning from Adam Turner at Sleep Outfitters. And Adam, I guess the big question is, why is yawning so contagious?
Right. But not just contagious when you see somebody across the room yawn. It can be as simple as, just throughout this conversation, I think I've yawned once,
Yeah.
Just thinking about it, hearing the word, and hopefully probably a lot of people listening, just when you start to think about a yawn in your head, if you close your eyes and do so, there's a pretty decent chance it'll happen. When I was writing the piece for the Ohio Health and Wellness magazine, I yawned about a dozen times just writing the piece, and hopefully it wasn't boring. It's just a matter of, seeing the word itself is enough to bring about a yawn. And a lot of scholars seem to have linked this to empathy, the ability to understand and share in others' feelings. Children, usually they use children as an example. They usually aren't as susceptible to contagious yawning until they're 4 to 5 years old. And, expectedly, that's also when they start to develop empathetic behavior. So they seem to have linked this with, empathetic social cues. Just when you see somebody else yawning, it helps encourage it yourself. This kind of leads to an interesting phenomenon as well, where we're more likely to mirror the yawn of somebody that's socially or genetically close to ourselves rather than a stranger, which seems to imply a kind of communicative social aspect to yawning as well. So I think it's part of the reason a single clear definition of why we yawn or why it's contagious has kind of plagued scientists for so long. There's just it seems to be linked to so many different things. But they generally have seen this as relating to mirror neurons, which are brain cells that we use for learning and self-awareness. These guys fire off in our heads when we see someone else performing an action, or we think about it, or we ourselves perform an action, and it helps through repetition over time to learn, certain social cues, certain self-awareness, and how we relate to others in the world. Dedicating more of your time and day to getting quality sleep. These are all things that'll help keep your brain cool, hopefully help you yawn less. And, it probably won't stop yawns altogether, because just thinking about it can help bring one out. But thankfully, they're it's not a painful experience. They're usually pretty enjoyable. So if we have to have the quirk, at least it's kind of fun to yawn sometimes.
Hey, there's nothing better than a yawn and a good stretch, right?
Exactly, right.
Adam, thanks so much for joining us today. Adam Turner from Sleep Outfitters. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks again for listening to this Today's Health and Wellness podcast mini episode, brought to you by Central Ohio Health and Wellness Magazine and Today's Health web pages on theblitz.com, 1039jackfm.com, and WMNI.com. Contact us if you have a health and wellness segment you would like us to cover. And sponsors, our contact information is in the podcast notes. We look forward to hearing from you.
Circle270media.com